I think we're going to go ahead and get started. And first off, wanted to introduce myself and thank everyone for participating. So my name is Michelle Hadwiger, and I'm the Director of Global Business Development for the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, as well as the Deputy Director of the Office of Economic Development International Trade. Lead a team that does the domestic recruitment and retention portfolio, as well as the international trade and our exports and foreign direct investment, and lead our $18 million Advanced Industries portfolio fund, as well as oversee this Defense Diversification Grant Program. So we really appreciate your interest in what the state's doing to help align and leverage new opportunities, and we appreciate you being a participant in this effort. So I first wanted to kind of lay the groundwork for why we're here and where we started. And I wanted to start with Governor Hickenlooper's bottom-up economic development strategy and plan, the Colorado Blueprint. When we embarked on the Colorado Blueprint in 2011, we developed a bottom-up strategy based on input from the local communities, the private sector, as well as academic institutions of higher learning, and tried to find, what was a good, responsible strategy for economic development for the state. How can we be more resilient? How can we be more nimble? And how can we develop proactive, responsible policies? In order to do that, we developed a framework for how are we going to convene industry leaders. We wanted it to be truly bottom-up and be led by C-level executives. We convened 20 to 25 C-level executives across 14 different industries. And we had them build their business plan from the bottom up. It gave state mandates, what should the state do and what role should they play. It gave private sector initiatives, what should the private sector own and what should the private sector do. And then in the case of aerospace or bioscience, or where federal programs are applicable, what can the federal government do and what can the delegation do to support industry in an actionable way. So we convened all 14 of those industries and around these 6 core objectives, providing a common framework for having a discussion about, build a business-friendly environment, cutting red tape, what regulations are barriers to entry to have companies grow or companies that would remain successful participants in the Colorado economy. How do we retain and recruit and regrow new supply chain and value chain opportunities to mine that ecosystem and help existing Colorado companies stay in Colorado? How do we increase access to capital and opportunities to fund new opportunities and encourage job growth? How do we create and market a stronger brand? That's not necessarily the brand for Colorado. That was a brand for each respective industry. How does aerospace elevate itself as the #1 aerospace economy in the country? How does information and technology elevate itself as Colorado being one of the most innovative states in the country? Educate and train the workforce. How are we developing proactive and responsible workforce initiatives and things that translate to the private sector at a speed that's faster than perhaps working through the university system? How do we help get that streamlined? And then how do we cultivate technology and innovation? How do we become a state that encourages innovation and identifies opportunities that enable the market to commercialize faster and help facilitate that based on our discussions? We had cross-industry collaboration, and from that, the convening of all 14 key industries, a trend occurred where we recognized that the advanced industries, the ones that have a higher propensity to invest in research and development and are driven by STEM occupations, had the largest economic output for the state of Colorado. And therefore, our largest driver should be an investment that we focus on so that we can get a greater return on investment for the taxpayers and for the state. And we developed a proactive strategy around the 7 advanced industries, which are listed here as advanced manufacturing, technology and information, electronics, aerospace, bioscience, energy and natural resources, and infrastructure engineering. Again, that was defined as industries that tend to spend more of their profits on research and development and are driven by STEM backbone occupations. And what do the key industries, what do the advanced industries mean to the Colorado economy? Again, why focus on your greatest return on investment? The advanced industries in Colorado represent 30% of the state's wage earnings, 30% of total sales revenues across industries within the state, 35% of the state's total exports, and represent more than 500,000 high-paying jobs. So that's why the state's focus on these activities is important. The jobs picture, what do these jobs represent in the Colorado economy and nationally? As you can see from this table, 6 of the 7 advanced industries are outpacing the nation in terms of job growth. And to have that diverse portfolio right here in Colorado and encourage leveraging resources that help continue to support that growth is a huge opportunity for the state. So as you can see, aerospace is one of our top advanced industries in terms of employment growth. So where's the history come from? Again, just to outline the timeline and the history of how we got here. So we started with the Colorado Blueprint, as I mentioned, in 2011, and continue to make those business plans actionable. And this grant is one of those actionable items that we are leveraging the work of the Colorado Blueprint. We were selected by the National Governors Association Policy Academy on making our future, encouraging opportunities in manufacturing. We pulled together a investing in community partnerships manufacturing grant application, which then led to and informed the work of this grant application by identifying the advanced industry clusters, forming a codified group that helps support the advanced industries, and then again submitting the grant proposal for Colorado to be selected for this defense diversification grant. Initially, when we started the grant, it was identified as SMART Colorado. SMART stood for Strengthening Manufacturing by Accelerating Research and Technology. We recognized that that brand was being used by some marijuana uses in the state of Colorado, and therefore decided to pivot to get the word out about the grant in a more strategic and mindful way. We switched the name to Forefront Colorado and rebranded the effort based on that language being used by other industries. So that brings us to today. We're implementing the work of the grant and continue to do so, and again have renamed the SMART project Forefront. What are the goals of the Defense Diversification Grant? You know, we really want Colorado companies, this is our perspective on the grant, is that we want Colorado companies to be more resilient and more nimble. So the definition of defense diversification from the traditional aerospace community may be a little bit different than what we're using the definition as, which is, you know, how to become more resilient, pivot in a market, identify adjacent opportunities where there are enabling technologies that can help an industry, you know, supply to a different industry outside of government-dependent contracts. True defense diversification may have a different definition for true aerospace companies in terms of diversifying their portfolio. So we just wanted to make sure that you all knew what we were defining as that goal. The Department of Defense's economic adjustment provides funding to offset the effects of changing in procurement spending, again, trying to get companies to be more commercial in application versus depending on government contracts. And the Office of Economic Development and International Trade plans to leverage this funding to advance our long-term goals, again, by helping Colorado companies pivot, become more nimble, become more resilient, and as the sequestration conversation continues to occur in the market, as defense budgets are continued to be questioned, how can those companies still remain viable companies in Colorado and continue to support our small business through their supply chains and value chain opportunities? And so why are we focusing on El Paso County first? You know, this is a first not one of our first meetings, but a first kickoff to really, you know, get the community engaged in this opportunity and make you aware of you know, what's in it for the community and for Colorado companies. As you can see from this chart on top military spending locations, El Paso County represents $4.5 billion in military spend. That's a huge part of our economy, a huge economic driver, and we want to make sure that we are, again, leveraging and supporting communities and opportunities that have great ROIs for the state of Colorado that we can continue to facilitate growth and opportunity in. And without further ado, I will introduce the 5th District Congressman Lamborn, who has a long bio and a great history here in Colorado. He was a World War II veteran. He has father was. Good point. Well, I apologize for writing my notes chicken scratch. His father was a World War II veteran. He does. And has a journalism degree from the University of Kansas, and then went on to get a law degree from the University of Kansas. joined the Colorado State Legislature and was elected Senate President Pro Tem and chaired the State Senate Military and Veterans Affairs Committee. In 2006, he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, representing the 5th District based in Colorado Springs. And in 2015, Doug was named the Vice Chairman of the Strategic Forces Subcommittee of the House and Armed Services Committee, and continues to support our great state in our defense, military, and continues to support the 5th District here in Colorado Springs. So we're happy to have Congressman Lamborn here. I also wanted to point out that we have Commissioner Peggy Littleton in the room here to support the project, as well as State Legislator Kit Rupee and Katie, I'm going to pronounce your last name wrong, Lowry, with the Mayor John Souther's office. So we welcome our elected officials, appreciate their participation, and without further ado, Congressman Lamborn.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and thank you for your interest and the governor's interest in our roundtable here this morning. And besides the other elected officials who were just mentioned, we also have representatives from Senator Michael Bennett's office, so I appreciate your involvement and interest also. We also have today a lot of leaders from industry, from academia, from government, from so many sectors that are here today, and I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. So this is a great turnout, and I want to thank you. I can't thank every single person individually. There's a lot of distinguished people here, but I do want to especially thank Harry Horowitz from the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, and Tim Heaton from the Colorado Advanced Manufacturing Association for partnering with me to raise attention toward the Defense Industry Adjustment Grant awarded to Colorado. This important funding will provide diversification assistance directly to defense and aerospace companies who can endure the heaviest cuts from the downturn in defense spending. I greatly appreciate your commitment to support the Colorado Springs defense and aerospace community and to make our Catalyst campus a top priority as you kick off the first of 9 major projects across the state of Colorado. So I want to do 2 things to give some context for the rest of the discussion this morning. First, I'll give you my perspective on the big picture, my thoughts on where we are in the DoD budget and where we might be headed. Second, I want to share my thoughts on how Colorado Springs fits in to help the Defense Department equip the brave men and women who sign up to put their lives on the line for us. So first, the big picture. Where are we with the defense budget? Before I talk about where we might be headed, I want to briefly talk about where we've been. There are many ways to measure how much we spend on defense. The overall dollar amount is very important, but when you're trying to make sense of the historical context, it's more helpful to look at the defense spending as a share of our GDP and as a share of the overall federal spending. Since World War II, and unfortunately I wasn't a veteran of World War II, but my father was, and I do want to honor his memory. He fought in 11 campaigns in North Africa, Sicily, and Italy. So he was fully committed, as so many Americans were. Since that time, we've spent an average of 5.5% of our GDP on defense during wartime and 5% during peacetime. During this time period, we've seen big drawdowns after Vietnam, at the end of the Cold War, and recently since 2010. I won't throw too many numbers at you, but I want to compare the Clinton drawdown in the 90s to the current drawdown. In both cases, we cut defense spending from 5%, which remember is our historical peacetime average since World War II, down to 3%. Now with a $17 trillion economy, a 2% cut is a very real national defense risk, in my opinion. It's a little too late to debate the cuts of the 90s, but I do want to point out one obvious thing about the current drawdown. President Obama has cut the military while the world has become more dangerous. This is one audience I don't need to remind about the growing actual and potential threats to our national security. Even worse, under the president's budget, the trend continues downward over the next 5 years, leaving us spending only 2% of our GDP on the military. We haven't seen a level that low since before World War II. Meanwhile, defense spending is also shrinking as a portion of the overall federal spending. Since Vietnam, we spent on average 21% of our federal budget on defense. Today, we spend well below that, roughly 15% of the pie. And here, too, the trend only gets worse in the future. Getting to the near-term and annual budgets, Congress is very close to finishing its work on the budget for fiscal year 16, but we still have a lot of loose ends to tie up when we get back from the August recess to finalize the budget and prevent another shutdown. On the House Armed Services Committee, where I serve, we came close to getting the Defense Authorization Bill, or NDAA, done before the recess. We passed it out of the House. The Senate has a version also. I'm honored to be on the conference committee that is currently working out the final differences between the House and Senate bills. One of the top priorities going back to D.C. in a week is to finish up that work with the Senate and get this bill across the finish line and to the President's desk, as we've done for more than 50 years in a row now. There are a lot of great things in this year's NDAA for our country and for Colorado. Unique to this year's bill are two major efforts to rebalance our military's tooth and tail. We are starting to reform our military compensation system, ensuring that we keep faith with the troops and continue to retain the best and the brightest. And we are also advancing the first elements of a long-term acquisition reform effort designed to ensure that our warfighters maintain their technological edge. Turning to appropriations, the House has worked hard to pass 6 appropriation bills this year, while the Senate has passed none. I think the most likely and unfortunate scenario is that we pass a short-term continuing resolution, or CR, that will give us time to pass another Ryan Murray-type budget deal, probably worked out by leadership staff from the House and Senate, rather than budget or appropriations staff. While I'm hopeful we can get this done, it will take a lot of work. It is getting harder and harder to find offsets and to find any middle ground between Republicans who prefer cutting spending and Democrats who prefer raising taxes. We also have only 12 legislative days in September before the end of the fiscal year, and we do have other big important issues like the Iran deal and the highway bill to deal with. So there are definitely other possible outcomes as well. A shutdown could still be caused by any number of controversial issues, none of which are related to defense, such as the very recent important debate over defunding Planned Parenthood or EPA policies. And don't forget that presidential politics are already affecting our work in Congress, especially on the Senate side, where it seems like half the Senate is running for president. We could also see a longer-term CR if we can't reach a deal over how important defense spending is compared to non-defense spending. Unfortunately, my Democratic colleagues believe that funding the IRS and EPA should be as high of a priority in many cases as funding our nation's defense. In this debate, I will do my best to be a voice of reason in Congress and to defend defense spending above all. When you look carefully at the consequences of a long-term CR, it's devastating. Not only can we not do new starts, but we are at Budget Control Act or sequestration levels of spending. We in Congress need to do a better job of providing certainty to our defense industry. You here in this room know that as well as anyone. You are greatly affected by budgets, federal budgets, and I take personal responsibility to keep fighting for adequate and full and even higher defense spending. So that's where we've been and that's where we are. Looking ahead to 2017 and beyond, the most important way Congress can help the Defense Department is to deal with sequestration. Trying to fund defense at sequestration levels is like trying to fit a size 10 foot in a size 7 shoe. It just doesn't work. And it's dangerous for our own security and for the world's security. While there are many areas ripe for reform within the defense budget, it's not a perfect budget. Defense is simply not the driver of our debt. Beyond the desperate need to reverse the overall downward trend in defense spending, it's important to notice that certain areas of the defense budget will remain well-positioned for growth. When you look at the future of where things are headed, I must highlight how well-aligned Colorado Springs is to our nation's future defense needs. When I brought the Armed Services Committee Chairman, Mac Thornberry, to visit our military bases late last year, he put it very strongly, saying Colorado Springs is the future of defense. Our last chairman, Buck McKeon, had a similar impression when I brought him here, and I expect Congressman Joe Wilson, who chairs the Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittee, which I sit on, will see the same value when he visits some of our most advanced military missions with me this afternoon. All of the mission areas we excel at, space, cyber, missile defense, directed energy, are ones that will grow in years to come. We simply have to figure out things like how we can protect our own satellites, how we can have survivable, persistent intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, ISR, and how we can get ahead and stay ahead of the ballistic missile threats. In all of these areas and more, DoD is increasingly looking for companies that can help them provide agile, innovative solutions. There are some other expensive priorities that the department needs to do as well, probably first and foremost of which is modernizing our nuclear enterprise. Yogi Berra said, "I don't like to make predictions, especially when it involves the future." Still, the Colorado Springs defense and aerospace community is in a prime position to grow and enhance the incredible value that we provide to the warfighter. That's why initiatives like the Catalyst Campus are so exciting. Kevin O'Neill and his team have created a brilliant model for the future of high-tech diversification for defense, aerospace, and advanced manufacturing. His unique vision of creative collaboration and intense focus on innovation through high-tech talent will greatly enhance the local economy and help put Colorado Springs on the leading edge of emerging technologies. For many years, Colorado Springs has been in great need of a multipurpose community SCIF, or sensitive compartmentalized information facility, to enable small and medium-sized businesses to operate under various classifications and to open new doors for future contracts and ultimately new jobs. The Catalyst Campus is perfectly suited for this type of facility, and I encourage the Office of Economic Development and International Trade to take a serious look at this opportunity. In closing, I should point out that our defense and aerospace industries not only matter to the warfighters, but they matter to the state in important ways. Defense is the third largest sector in Colorado's economy, and Michelle was touching on this a few minutes ago, with $27 billion of economic impact. Here in El Paso County, there are 225 companies that work in defense and aerospace, supporting 107,000 jobs and $13 billion of economic impact. So when you look at the numbers, that means more than half of the statewide economic impact is right here in El Paso County. Once again, I greatly appreciate the Office of Economic Development and International Trade and the Colorado Advanced Manufacturing Association for taking time to learn how defense budget downturns greatly affect the Colorado Springs defense community, and I appreciate their willingness to partner with me for this important event. Thank you very much, and I now turn it over to Tim Heaton.
Thanks. I think I'm live. Am I live? So I get to wander around. It's a dangerous thing to do from somebody who's kissed the Blarney Stone. But I will try to keep this on schedule here. Good, perfect. A couple other introductions. We have Valerie Newcomb with us from Congressman Mike Kaufman's office, so thank you for being here. And we also have Rick Salander here with us, sitting down front. Rick is from the Office of Economic Adjustment. So at the end of the day, the buck stops there, right? Is that the way it works? Sorry, I just had to give myself an out. So real fast, see if I can make this work. Yep, I did, good. My name is Tim Heaton. I'm the president of the Colorado Advanced Manufacturing Alliance, and we're grateful to be here. Thank you, Congressman, for allowing us to be a part of this event. A little bit about who we are. So the mission of the Forefront Project is, as it says there, a public-private partnership. So CAMA there, you see on the left, we are the public. CAMA is the trade association for manufacturers. We're actually the first trade association ever to exist in Colorado for manufacturing. We did grow out of the blueprint, which is why it's so apropos for Michelle to kick this off and talk about the governor's blueprint. Myself, I was one of the 22, I'm going to use this term lightly, executives that the governor appointed to the blueprint process. At the end of that process, a group of us sat around and said, this is a great plan that we put together, but what are we going to do with it? We really don't have anywhere to go with it. And that's when we got together and decided to form CAMA. So we did grow out of the blueprint, but we are the public sector. We're a membership-based organization made up of manufacturers. Obviously, the private side here is first OEDIT and Michelle, followed by Rick with the Office of Economic Adjustment. So the goals or the mission that we're trying to fulfill here is, and I actually, the word strengthen the resiliency of all businesses within Colorado's defense sector, I wish I could say that I came up with those words, but actually those came from Dan from the Office of Economic Adjustment. He stood up in a meeting we had one day as we were discussing the goals and took the pen for the whiteboard and wrote that on the whiteboard and said, this is what we're all about. So obviously that's one of our key missions. But then as a public-private partnership, we want to make sure that we are in fact doing something that it ties into the governor's efforts, the state legislators' efforts. So that's where, advancing and growing all manufacturers across the advanced industry sector that Michelle talked about is so important to us. So CAMA really is trying to, and you'll see as we go forward, blend the two missions so that we're doing both, and we're going to leave behind something, and this is key, that what we leave behind is sustainable and not just a one-time shot to try and help the defense industry. And I was keeping track on how many times the Congressman mentioned Catalyst, and so I think I got the message here. Catalyst is an example, though, and that's why we're working with them, of how we will leave behind a lasting and sustainable legacy. So the objectives, then, are pretty straightforward. We want to create collaboration across the state, across all industries. Again, this is important because as the blueprint continues to emerge in Governor Hickenlooper's second term, what we call it, Blueprint 2.0, collaboration is a key to that plan. And what we came up with through our meetings ourselves has been collaboration is key to what they want us to do with this grant. And I should just pause there and say, so this grant came out, I think you awarded it to the state about a year ago. We received as the subrecipient in late October, early November. So what have we been doing in that time frame? Well, I'm a big believer in you go slow to go fast. So we have been going out and meeting, a lot of meetings, a lot of discussions, listening to people and listening to what's important. And that collaboration word came up multiple times. The next thing is really providing tools for advancement. If you follow the manufacturing sector, you know that the way your father and the way the military complex, if you will, quoting President Eisenhower here, built things during World War II and the period shortly thereafter, that era is gone. Manufacturing is not your grandfather's manufacturing today. You walk into rooms and manufacturing facilities today, I could take you to a shop up in Boulder that their manufacturing shop floor is probably, and I'm not going to make a prediction either here, but is probably cleaner than the table you eat at McDonald's. That's how clean, that's how automated manufacturing has become. But not all companies are doing that. So if we're going to advance all industries in the manufacturing and defense sector, we need to be providing the tools that allows them to advance. One of the best ways to do that is to connect them to best practices. There's some people in the room here that we're going to rely upon to help do that, but this is really about sharing best practices and helping companies learn from those who have already learned. And then key to all of this, as manufacturing has changed, so too is the way we make our workforce. And the key word there is make. And I'll go into a little more detail about that as we move forward. So, Forefront, and yes, that's spelled the way we intended it to be, is really built around 4 regions. As we traveled the state, and I know the state breaks it down to, how many different sectors or quadrants do you guys for economic development? You have 14. We broke it down to 4, keeping it simple. Northern Colorado, Western Colorado, Southern Colorado, and then the greater metropolitan area. So those are our 4 sectors. So what we're really trying to do here is connect the state through some centers that we'll be building out through this grant that allows manufacturers on the western slope to communicate and work with projects on the eastern slope and the eastern plains. Today, too often, they get left out because anybody that knows the I-70 corridor and how difficult it is to drive to Grand Junction, and believe me, I just did it this week, it's never easy. If we can build a way to collaborate electronically, and we're looking at some state-of-the-art technology, some technology that the State Department just put in their Situation Room. I've actually demoed this where we've been able to take a CAD drawing, break it down on one screen, while on a separate screen you're actually seeing the video of the part being made, and sit there and discuss the components, the tolerances. This is the type tool that we're putting in these centers to help facilitate this collaboration from east to west and north to south. And that's what's going to be in these centers. But these centers then have to connect. I mean, it's really great to build these rooms. They have to connect to something else. So these 4 centers are also going to be our conduit into the National Network for Manufacturing Innovation Institutes that are being stood up around the country by the President's, the White House, the Department of Commerce, NIST. There are 5 of them that have been launched today. The IACME, which had some big planning meetings going on just the last 3 days down in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. That's focused on composites. Here in Colorado, we are a part of that proposal through NREL. NREL is developing new technologies out of composites for wind energy. We have the Power America that is working on new broadband semiconductors. America Makes was the first one launched. This is working on additive manufacturing. LIFT, Carl School of Mines up in Golden, is a part of this one. It's working on lightweight metals. Obviously has a big impact into the defense industry. Both composites and lightweight metals has huge impact into that. And then the last one is the Digital Manufacturing Thread, or the DMDI. It's housed in Chicago. You know, Lockheed Martin is considered to be the father, if you will, of the digital thread as they built out the Joint Strike Force. So now, as that matures, how do we take that into manufacturers? How do we use that tool? Well, I'll be in Chicago later this month as we meet with them to talk about a proposal that we've put together that allows Colorado to be their test bed to connect small and medium-sized manufacturers to the rest of the country. So these 4 centers that you see on this map are going to be connected then to each of these DMDIs to make sure that not only are we sharing the best practices from within the state of Colorado, but also the best practices that are emerging from across the country. Inside each center, then, we're going to focus on, you're going to start to hear a theme here, 4 quadrants. Research and development, workforce development and training, business growth and advancement, and market diversification. So each of the 4 centers will have to emphasize and have programs in place in these 4 areas. Now today we're going to spend more time really on that last one there, market diversification. And we'll spend a little more time going into detail on that one. But that's really key. By market diversification, you can insert the word defense for market there. It really is, how do we diversify our base as we grow and build that resiliency within the marketplace? So we'll come back to that in a little more detail. So I'm going to go around let me back up. I'm going to go around the corner now. We're going to start up here with, is there a laser on this? Nope. Oh dear, now I turned it off. Help. There we go. So one of these is a laser. I'm going to start here with research and development, and I'll just work my way around clockwise here. So research and development, we'll be building out an application center. Odds are fairly strong. This is going to be housed in northern Colorado. The city of Loveland is coming forward to leverage our money with their money. They're going to put up $2 million. We're working with the state to grab additional, or hopefully access additional funding that we can leverage state, federal, and local monies to build out an application center. We're talking directly with a group called the Edison Welding Institute, or EWI. Don't let the word welding shock you there. They were originally called that when they were started as one of the Edison Institutes back in the 80s. Today, they are the only applied research institute in America dedicated to developing new technologies and solving manufacturers' problems. So they are housed in Columbus, Ohio. 2 years ago, they expanded into Buffalo, New York, and been a tremendous economic development boom for the Buffalo, New York area. Then they turned and started looking west. I know they've looked at Salt Lake City, they've looked at Wichita, and they're looking at Colorado. And if we can successfully pull this off, we will have done more to advance manufacturing and benefit the defense manufacturers in the state of Colorado than just about anything else I can think of. They will provide the technology of the future. They're already out there developing those tools and technologies right now. So again, that will probably be housed in Loveland. I can't say it's a done deal. Loveland City Council will be acting on this in late September, and then based on what they do, we'll be moving forward from there. Workforce development and training. This is fundamental, not just to the defense industry, not just to manufacturing. I literally had the Colorado Realtors Association call me not too long ago when they heard about this program and say, hey, how do we get to be a part of this? Because we have a problem. Most our real estate agents are late baby boomers, and they're retiring, and we're not recruiting new agents. All right, that's the same problem that we're having in manufacturing. It's the same problem that you're seeing in other technologies or other industry sectors as well. So BASIC stands for Business and Schools in Collaboration. We've got piles and reams of paper that I can download to you if you really want to get into this, but I'll put it to you this way. America is the only country in the world that apparently is so wealthy that we can pay to educate our workforce twice. Our schools, we pay our schools, and they do, no criticism here, they do a great job, but they do a great job teaching theory. Then they graduate, whether that's from college or from a 4-year or 2-year certificate program or coming straight out of high school, they come to industry, and now we have to re-educate them again in practice. So the whole concept behind BASIC is how do we bring theory and practice together? We do that by putting industry in the classroom. Oh, wait a minute, let's try that a little differently. What if we made industry the classroom? We've already had great success working with Denver Public School System, and we're going to continue this around the state. They now are changing their curriculum, and they've got to get it approved through the whole process. But at the staff level, they've changed their curriculum so that a senior in high school can spend 2 days in the classroom, 3 days in a shop or an industry learning a skill. That's the type of training that we're driving behind the BASIC program, which is one of the projects as a part of this OEA effort. Business Growth and Advancement Centers. Again, this is housed in that center. People say, what are you going to do in these centers? Well, I'll just give you an example that might make sense to you. If you're familiar with NIMS, the National Manufacturing NIMS. National, I'm sorry? Somebody help me here. Lifeline? Tom. No, National, why am I drawing a blank on it? It's a national standard training program for machining, so my apologies. It's a 4-course program. Community colleges are starting to teach NIMS 1. We were putting a program on where we were flying an instructor out here for $10,000 to do a 5-day training program. He could do that training now from his office in Pennsylvania, broadcast it into these 4 centers, and we can save that money and provide that same level of training now digitally. That's an example of business growth and advancement. We're now, and it's a train-the-trainer program. So Kevin, if he was doing machining, he can have one of his employees sit through that 5-day program, take the test, and if they passed, they can then go into their plant and do the training for the rest of their employees. That's how we're going to advance these manufacturers. That's what this is all about. Obviously, we want to leverage what we have going on with our MEP. Tom Bugnitz is sitting up here from the Manufacturer's Edge. How do we get more lean? I was on a conference call that OEA helped set up with folks from MIT, and one of the MIT professors made the statement that if we can just get every small and medium-sized manufacturer in the country to adopt Six Sigma, we would move the needle significantly. And yet, to get companies to do this is always a challenge. They don't have time to stop to do this. Well, we want to help drive this, working with partners such as the Manufacturer's Edge to put these process improvements in place inside these manufacturers. I also will tell you that manufacturers love to learn from each other. So we will be housing and holding in these centers brown bag lunches where we can get 10 CEOs for a CEO roundtable and connect then to 3 other centers where there'll be maybe 10 CEOs in the Western Slope, all to talk about best practices. The following week we'll do a we'll do brown bag lunch with HR directors to talk about hiring issues. So this is how we will use these centers to help all these companies grow and advance. Market diversification, we want these centers to be that focal point. And again, I told you I'm going to do a deeper dive into this, and this is where I'm going to start sliding into that. The Congressman just told us defense is changing. We're looking at real cuts. We've seen significant cuts over time. We need the companies that are out there, though, to stay strong, to stay resilient, because there will come a time, as you pointed out, we live in a very dangerous world today. We're going to need those industries again someday. I wish to say we wouldn't, but we all know that's the case. So we need to make sure those small and medium-sized companies are resilient, and more importantly, and I had a conversation with Lockheed Martin on this one time, they're concerned they're not going to be there the day they need to flip the switch and go back to them. So helping them pivot into other market opportunities is key to this whole program. So what I want to do now is dive into a little more detail of how we're going to do that. So Michelle made a great case for why El Paso first. You saw the numbers. It's pretty clear why we're down here in El Paso. We're going to launch this program in El Paso, focused on defense contractors in the El Paso County area. And actually, I should back up a little bit. Southern Colorado, because we will be doing a similar meeting like this in Pueblo. There are defense contractors down there as well. So we're going to focus on Southern Colorado for our pilot project. It's going to be a phased approach. If you didn't pick one up and you're interested in participating in this program, Randy Scott, sitting over here, has a one-pager. We also are launching a brand new website for Forefront over the weekend. It'll go live, fingers crossed, tomorrow night. And you can actually find the application online where you can download this. But you'll need to fill out an application, and if you qualify, and we're looking to pick between 15 and 20 companies, you will be eligible then to receive a diagnostics of your company. Where do you stand? Do you have the tools? Do you have the financial capabilities? Do you have the workforce to pivot into another industry? The Manufacturer's Edge, we're going to partner with them. They're looking at different tools right now that the Department of Commerce or NIST have developed and made available across the country for similar OEA efforts. So Tom and his team are looking at those tools right now. We will use one of those tools to provide this diagnostics. After that, then you'll be eligible to receive up to a $15,000 voucher to go hire, and we'll have a preferred list of vendors to go hire the consultant or perhaps organizations such as the Manufacturer's Edge to make the upgrades that you need to get into your program. Then after we've sort of proven the case here, then we'll roll it out into the other 3 regions across the state. So again, we have a one-pager on this. If you didn't get it, come see Randy. All of this will also be on our website. Oh, I forgot to put, so this is the criteria. If you want to find out if you're one of them, these are the 3 criteria that we did not come up with. This criteria came to us from the OEA. The only variable that came to us, and this is straight from the grant, the verbiage you see here, the only flexibility that we had in this was the identified time frame. And so what we're counting as the impacted time frame here is fiscal year 2013, 14, 15, and it does look forward, which is why the Congressman's predictions, though we didn't make any, of looking forward to fiscal year 2016 is important because those are the 4 fiscal years that we will be using is this identified time frame. So again, fiscal year 13, 14, 15, and 16. As Congress, either whether it's through a CR or if they approve the appropriations bill, the cuts that come out of that, if they impact your company, you would be eligible under one of these 3 criteria. There you have the time frames. So again, the process is you'll have to apply. The applications will become available on September 1st. You'll go through a diagnostics through the Manufacturer's Edge, and then you'll be able to use that voucher for specialized support services. Again, up to $15,000. Now, there will be a matching requirement. This is as much about making sure you have some skin in the game. We have not determined that. It will be a sliding scale. We intend to work with our partners at OEA and the state to come up with that scale. All right. I will be happy to have answer questions on that in more detail afterwards. I'll be hanging around. Be glad to get into more details. But at this point, what I want to do is introduce Kevin O'Neill. I think everybody in the room knows Kevin O'Neill, so there's not much I can do to introduce him. I bet we could all stand up here and tell, no, we won't tell stories about Kevin. But as I said, the key to this project in our mind is sustainability. And as we traveled the state and started having all these meetings, this one person's name kept coming up, Kevin O'Neill, Kevin O'Neill. And then finally it became the Catalyst Campus. And I was like, good, I don't have to talk about Kevin anymore. But nevertheless, the Catalyst Campus and what Kevin is doing over there, tremendous synergy between their objectives and our objectives. So clearly we see an opportunity for a partnership here. But instead of me trying to explain that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin and let him tell us about the Catalyst Campus.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate the opportunity to present Catalyst Campus to CAM and the state on our objectives and what we're doing. Thank you, Congressman, for joining us today, and Rick from the Office of Economic Adjustment. I am but a representative of Catalyst Campus. This isn't about a Kevin O'Neill plan. This is about a community project that we've stood up. I happen to be one of the citizens behind it that's feeling a little pain, a little the growth potential of what we're doing there. A partner in the room, Ingrid Richter, that has spent her days every day for the last year trying to build out the campus and what it could be. The campus is a physical location. It is 100,000 feet of facility to start with. We've added 37,000 feet since then, based in downtown Colorado Springs on the corner of Colorado and Pikes Peak. So the Catalyst campus is about defense contractors and the diversification around those defense contractors. We do, as part of our inherent fabric, team. Our largest team today that Catalyst is trying to bring to Colorado Springs is a multi-billion-dollar contract with 64 companies teaming together. Our goal is to take those opportunities and focus into the commercial civilian sector and use some of the money that the government, the federal government, the Department of Defense has thrown into that industry and utilize that into a civilian and commercial world. As we talk through what the Catalyst does do, we'll see a lot of overlap to what Forefront is trying to promote in the state of Colorado, and we hope to team and partner with, with Forefront to be able to move our campus forward on a teaming opportunity. New market opportunities, diversification. As we talk, the Department of Defense has decreased their budget. We have to look at other opportunities that these defense contractors can move into. Environmental intelligence, right? Satellite, commercial satellite operations are just two examples that we will promote. As these small companies, as Tim said, were identified 15 to 20 in southern Colorado, they're going to need support services as a SWOT analysis is done on those companies. We tend to support those companies with the services that will be provided at the Catalyst campus, and that's accounting and legal and proposal writing, infrastructure support, contract negotiation, IP determination, those type of services that are hard to find and hard to understand for small companies as they have no exposure. We plan on having those services at the campus and offering them to the CAMA opportunity and the 15 to 20 companies identified down here. Workforce development. We're number 1 or number 2 now in the nation in educated workforce in the state of Colorado. As we see that, though, the Regional Business Alliance just published yesterday, 775 software jobs are open. 425 system engineer jobs are open in this community. Right? That's over 1,000 jobs that we could fill with gap education. Those jobs today, in our minds, are not being filled because although our 4-year and 2-year college institutions are doing a great job, they teach in arrears. They teach from behind. The needs got to be there before they stand up to class. We plan on doing gap education, workforce development on real-time needs, actually educated by the folks that would employ them. So as we take codes and we integrate them and we do database building and new types of technology, the campus will take on non-commercially viable education. Very small classes, very pointed classes, filling specific jobs. Focus on technology deployment. If we talk about labs, a lot of us think of the physical location of a room where you walk in and there's lasers or some sort of equipment. We plan on promoting those physical labs, but also virtual labs, cloud labs, labs to help our community. As we work today, we're trying to help our fire departments and our police departments collaborate and build out social needs and reduction of costs through the campus. We're looking at the operation of satellites in civilian world here in Colorado Springs, which isn't being done today. Although Lockheed's got a facility just north of here, why aren't we doing it here? 225 companies touch space and aerospace in this community. We should have a bigger role in satellite operations. We hope to do that in the near future. Just to give a couple examples, but we can see that there is a lot of overlap on what we're doing and where we're headed. Our project was started in November of 14. We plan on being up in February of 16, running with a lot of these services and support, and hope to continue our partnership with CAMA. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. So I made a note there that I failed to say earlier. So CAMA's manufacturing, and you heard me use that word many times, but this grant, and so when it gets back to the project that I just mentioned, the defense diversification, the funds, the assistance to go to companies, you do not have to be a manufacturer. If you are a technology company, okay, if you're a software programmer, you are eligible for this. So the only criteria was the slide that I had up there. Let me see if I can back up. That's it. Nowhere do you see the word manufacturing. If you're impacted by this, or if you know somebody that was impacted by this, they are eligible for this. So I wanted to make sure I emphasize that. And the reason that is so important is because as we looked under Forefront with the key things you see there that we're focused on, we realized if we put EWI up on the north end, we know Carl Springs is a solid base for cybersecurity, for technology development. We want that anchor in southern Colorado that's helping these companies as well. Now, it doesn't mean somebody couldn't walk into the Advancement Center in southern Colorado and say, I need help in manufacturing. Great, we can get you connected with the expert either up in Loveland, if that's where it ends up being, or through the Edge or something like that. We'll make those connections. Or likewise, if I got a company in Grand Junction, and there are several, and they have talked to me. I was over there on Monday, and they're very interested, as you know, in some of the stuff that you're doing in the new technology group that's forming. So they want to know how are they going to play into all of this. So the bottom line is, as we move forward, what we saw is that there's truly an alignment of mission, as well as an alignment of services between the Catalyst campus and what CAM is trying to do. So where we find ourselves today, this is not a done deal. Kevin is a tough negotiator. Actually, it's Ingrid, for those who want to know. But we are working on office space. How do we have shared office space inside the Catalyst campus? Support services. Kevin talked about his support services. We have inside CAMA a group of service providers that can provide those same services. How do we share those services so we're not out there reinventing the wheel? FTEs. Obviously, there'll be some personnel that's going to be hired under this grant. How do we leverage that with Kevin's team so that we can make that a position that lasts beyond the OEA funding? You heard us talk about the SCIF. Kevin was in the process of standing that one up. We did some market research down here. At first, we were catching some mixed signals as to whether or not that was really needed or not. Then all of a sudden, we started talking to the right companies, and the needle flipped the other way and said, yes, we really do need to build out a SCIF down here. So we will be working with the Catalyst group to figure out how we do that. And if you're going to have a SCIF, you're going to have a facility security officer. So we hope to fund through this project as well an FSO who would be a part of the SCIF and be a part of the Catalyst campus. So those are the things that we're working on right now. Again, it is not a done deal. We're having these conversations. And the process is that once Catalyst and CAMA and Forefront come to agreements on this, then we have to sit down with Michelle and make sure the state is on board with all this. And then Michelle has to go sit down with Rick and Dan and make sure they're on board with all this. So what you've heard today is our plan as we're putting it together. We have some steps along the way that have to be done. I'm thrilled that Rick is here. I know Dan was in town yesterday. So I'm hoping that there's no surprises, that you're all on board, and it's just now a matter of starting to implement that. And that's really where we are in this process. So that being said, we actually finished on time. Somebody should make note of that. 2 Irishmen finished on time. But we have the congressman for a few more minutes. So we are open to questions. Myself, I'll do my best. Kevin, representing the Catalyst campus, the congressman, or Michelle. So any questions? And who took the microphone? Kevin? Ah. Oh, there you go. Great.
I'll take the first one. State Representative Gordon Klingenschmidt, I want to say thank you to our distinguished panel and the congressman for making time to do this. As an Air Force Academy graduate, 20-year veteran, I think I can also speak for the other members of the Colorado Springs delegation to the State House of Representatives. And I know a lot of these questions are driven by federal budget issues, but what are some things that we could do at the State House in Denver to support the defense industry in this town and maybe your project?
I think all of us should answer that question. So Kevin's jumping up. I'm going to let him go first. It'll come live. He'll get it.
We have some opportunities that are national opportunities to bring to Colorado in space and aerospace, both in the commercial, civilian, and the DoD world. We, as a state, and a citizen of that state, would vie for those opportunities. We could create national exposure here in the state of Colorado. If we talk about GPS, right, and we talk about what that satellite constellation does for us as civilians, we have the ability to stand up potentially an application center for GPS and testing and those type of environments that doesn't exist today. And if we vie for that, it could end up here, right? A research and development lab. So there's opportunities like that that are in the defense world that could go anywhere, that we as a state should argue should go here to support the cluster of companies that are located.
Michelle, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I won't respond directly to a policy question because I would get myself in trouble. But what I will say is that for us and for industry, having a unified voice and a bipartisan effort is huge for the industry. And we saw that with this grant. Actually, it was a bipartisan effort of all the delegates that signed in support of this DoD grant and in support of this diversification effort. So I would say a unified voice and then strong positions on strategic committees that can advance Colorado. So, you know, strategic positions on new committees that are going to help advance our mission as it relates to the work we're doing directly in Colorado are huge opportunities for the state. So.
I'll add to that in the, I'll echo the bipartisanship. So at the State House this year, workforce was a key topic, and I'm thrilled that we got 8 of 11 workforce bills passed bipartisanly. So thank you all for those efforts. One of them, I know Pete Lee, one that I worked closely with him on the internship bill, that passed. So, but there's a lot more to be done on workforce. And I'll just use that as an example to segue into the rest of it as well. We've got to break down silos. I know everybody talks about that, but my work with the Department of Education and all the different school districts, there are just a lot of silos out there, and we get so trapped in those silos in our own state, it's difficult to be elevated to the level of visibility that we need to do, as Kevin was talking about. So it's easy to get trapped in state house politics, but for the benefit of the state, to break down those silos and elevate what we're working on to obtain the higher visibility at the national level is what's going to help us succeed with that. Did you want to add your 2 cents? You're going to pass on that one? I'll pass on that. Okay. Sir. Oh. Right. Oh.
To my
Go ahead,
fellow
Kit.
legislator, the State Representative Kit Rupe here. I actually serve on the Business Affairs and Labor Committee, which works with OEDIT, and thank you very much for all your help as an industry. Certainly I co-sponsored many of those bills that we're talking about for workforce development. I think that it's very important that we have this transition, and I think that we're kind of all working from different vectors coming together on a similar synergy, if you will. I am actually doing a Veterans Summit, and I'm going to invite you all to that, where I'll have Department of Labor, Department of Regulatory Affairs, a couple of my other fellow legislators, Representative Carver, Representative Landgraf, talking about some bills that also have to do with workforce. So I think that we have a synergy that really maybe as a delegation, we should be sitting down and having a conversation instead of coming from different vectors, but to collaborate and fine-tune and get the synergy going in a more positive direct relationship. As far as veterans are concerned, or even office of these folks, I think that it's very important for our economy as a representative in the House. And I think that we have some challenges. We might be focusing more on policy this year than necessarily tax incentivizing, simply because we're looking at a difficult year for the budget. But policy, putting it in place and getting that stage set is probably very important, then bringing in how we implement it. So I thank you all for very much for doing this, and I hope to work with you some more in the future.
Thank you. Sir?
Yes, my name is Mark Lilovigen, and I represent the employer support of the Guard and Reserve in Colorado. Obviously, workforce development and training is a big portion of all of this. And at the same time, as a byproduct of our defense drawdown, approximately 500 young service members are processed out of Fort Carson to civilian life every month. And yet 90% of those young men and women leave this state for elsewhere. Seems to me that we have a very valuable asset there that we're letting get away. And I'm wondering if there have been efforts focused on, through programs like GAP education, like the Catalyst Campus, and so on, if we could try to combine efforts to not only retain those young men and women who have leadership, maturity, responsibility, reliability far beyond their age group, and keep them for that source of that workforce that we need to develop.
I'm going to answer that one first, and I'll, again, pass the microphone around. But So to answer your question simply, yes. I don't have my calendar with me, but I know I have a meeting next week sometime with the Department of Veterans Affairs to talk about how do we integrate more of that workforce into what we're trying to do here. But first, a story. This isn't CAMA's first effort to do this. During the oil and boom days, probably 14, 15 months ago, I had a company approach me that was in desperate need of a workforce. So I actually, in that time, teamed up with Adams County, and we recruited and brought in a bunch of young workers who had just come out of the military. And I know this is going to come across a bit condemning, but at the end of the day, the remedial education that was required of that workforce to try to train them to become a certified welder was more than the company could afford. And so they then handed them back to the workforce center, but the workforce center then had limitations to what they can do. And so it was a real eye-opener for me, because I thought, what a great opportunity. I got a company that needs to hire 20, 30 guys. I got them right here, young men and women, and yet I think they ended up hiring 2. So we need to, as we try to bring that group into the workforce, what we're doing with Catalyst is fundamental. What we're doing with the basic program is fundamental, because what we learned is, while they have learned some specific skills and they are experts at that through their service, we do need to broaden their knowledge base so that they can plug in easier into industry. So in many ways, what we're finding in that workforce is similar to what we've encountered coming out of the school system. And that is, they have been trained, not just theory, but they have been trained in a very narrow skill set. And we need to broaden that to get them to plug into the industry. We are taking advantage, now that we're so aware of it, we are definitely building programs that's going to allow that to happen. And we're starting the meetings with the Veterans Affairs groups now. Anybody else want to take a crack at that? Or correct me?
No, I do believe that one of the things that we hear in our community is we're over 40% direct and indirect support from the military. Let's not grow that. My cause is to keep it healthy, right? We do have a lot of Army and Air Force, retired military coming through this community. They do have clearances. They do have capabilities. They have knowledge. Our belief is through a community SCIF, through community programs to stand up veteran companies, new companies. Why not veterans? We have a healthy workforce here, retirees, and they're great base jobs that we plan on supporting them and creating those opportunities, identifying those opportunities for them that are around the nation. So for us, the gap education and the retiring workforce is a very small delta to get them employed. If we can get them while they still have the clearances that they're retiring with, and we can get them exposed back into the communities they came out of. But Colorado Springs seems to be a hub for retiring. We're 50,000 here. That would be our goal to lever them.
You know, and there's huge cost savings in that as well. As somebody who's had to go through the process of both Q and top secret, that's an expensive process. And so if we can keep these people while they're still current and attach them to a need, that saves money. Other questions? Somebody. Any other? Thank you. My lifeline, finally. Where were you 20 minutes ago?
on the skip issue, having worked in skips throughout my career, my eyebrows went up when you said community skip. So I don't know how far you are down that road, but you may want to rebrand it, just because when you get to the process of trying to get this thing certified, I think a lot of people who are involved in that process tied to a community skip. You know?
Oxymoron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might want to think of another, it's a good idea to understand what you're trying to do is bring a place together so that you don't have to have 15 skips.
Yep.
But that's going to be a really tricky one for you.
So we believe we have a path forward on that, although it's not completely inked. If we look at the communities around the country that have an educational SCIF, they do very well. The one I just visited on the East Coast, they have one in Albuquerque. They have 15 projects going. They have college education students coming through there and small companies supporting it. So although we would argue that somebody has to supply the DD-254 to support that, and the customer has to be the right customer, oddly enough, we have the right customer right here with the Air Force. They have to allow you to use that SCIF in different compartments and different capabilities, but to build it is not the hard part, right? It is the certification and that type. We'll get there. We believe there is a model out there. We don't have to invent that wheel. We just have to bring it to Colorado Springs.
Sir.
Yeah, it's not so much a question, but as a comment, if it's acceptable. Kevin, you brought up the perception that, some of the community, why should we focus so much on the military? It's an overdependence. I'm Paul Rochelle with Summit Economics. We just did the study on the economic impact of DOD in Colorado. And one of the things that we found in that report that I think is important for people to keep in mind is if you look at different technologies in DOD and aerospace, they all have different product life cycles. And what people are looking at are many of the bases that are in the mature phase of the product life cycle. But the real future of Colorado are all those early stage, introductory stage technologies, which will be the future of Colorado. So when we say that we're over-dependent on the military, that's if it was just one entity that only had one technology. We really have a lot of future opportunities based on the fact that industries of 2020 or 2050 are just being born now.
I think that's a good point, and I think, again, why El Paso County and why Southern Colorado, we have the opportunity, because of the subcommittee that the Congressman sits on, to give us a window into what that might look like with the future threats and start finding those opportunities. So, point well made, and yes, comments are welcome. This is a roundtable, so it may not be very round, but feel free just to put your comments in there. But I do think that's a good comment, and I think the state, thanks to the leadership of the Congressman, we have a window to really try and seize that as we go forward. Sir.
Dave Jeffrey, President JPM Prototype and Manufacturing here in Colorado Springs. Going back to basic,
Yep.
in getting the kids in high school into the shops for interns, currently my understanding of the law is that we can't have someone in the shop that is under 18.
Unless it is affiliated with the recognized curriculum through a school district.
Okay.
Hence, my work with the school districts. That has been one of the most stated comments that as we've gone through this process. Everybody has that fear, and it's a good fear because, I'm working closely with Pinnacle Assurance because, they have 95% of manufacturers or companies workers' comp, right? So I got them at the table with me in these discussions to make sure that we're, in fact, following the law so that we're not going to get ourselves in trouble with the Department of Labor because they have specific laws on internships that we have to follow as well. So we're going to follow that, but then we're also making sure we're keeping our insurance agent with us because that's who's ultimately going to cry foul if we screw up. So it just made me think of something else on the workforce that I just lost. But Lifeline, if you think of that, let me know. Other comments while I try to capture the thought that I just lost. Questions, comments? So one thing I want to say before I turn it back over to the Congressman to close, bet you didn't know you were doing that. This is the first of many town meetings that we're going to be holding around the state. We probably, the next week, we were trying to get this scheduled, and we're hoping to do some next week in the Pueblo area, but we will be traveling around. I'm looking at Andy sitting over here because I think you've got that agenda, I'm hoping. But we are using resources such as Andy to get these meetings set up around the state. We'll be using our other congressional offices. For those who don't know, Senator Bennett is perceived as one of the foremost leaders on education in the U.S. Senate because of obviously his role, former role as the head of the DPS, the Denver Public School System. So we're going to do some specific programs with the senator around the basic program. We're going to do something up in the Metro Denver area with our representatives from that area. So stay tuned. There's a lot more meetings to come. So if you didn't think of your question, I'm here. I'll be happy to give you a card. You can email it to me, and we'll just keep this dialogue going. So let's view this as the beginning of a dialogue, certainly not a one-time event. Congressman.
And I want to thank my staff for helping put this together. Dale Anderson, raise your hand. And I also have other people who are here, Lee Coburn and Sam Fletcher. And thank you for your help also. And all of you, thank you for being here. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Tim, Kevin, for helping present the information. And we are adjourned.